I know what you're thinking. This next one is basically recency bias. Well, or hometown bias. Well, you'd be right. But after all, I've done 9 of these. So logically, I mean, I can make this the 10th and make it count. So anyway, of course, as you see by the t-shirt, I have, and cats are running around being brats while I'm taping. This one's about my beloved hometown team, Toronto Blue Jays. Well, it's not completely hometown because I live in Kitchener, Ontario, not in Toronto. But yeah, I live close to Toronto anyway. And I've been to several Blue Jay games as a youngster. But anyway, this is about the Toronto Blue Jays in 1985. And no, it's not just because, I was born in 1985, so I turned 40 shortly. But the fact of the matter is that the 1985 Toronto Blue Jays made Canada believe. I mean, the Blue Jays were a low level franchise to a lot of people, but they made the American League and most of the National League take notice that these Blue Jays were ready to fly. This is a story about the 1985 Blue Jays and one of the worst chokes in baseball history. You've got Jeff Diamond, you've got one man, you've got a hat, a bat, and that's definitely not all. You got the bleachers, got from spring to fall, you got a dog, a drink, and that umpire's call. What do you want? Let's play what if. Okay. Okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. Okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. So let's talk about the Toronto Blue Jays, why don't we? They were born out of a couple of failed moves. The big failed move was in 1976 when the San Francisco Giants, tired of their dwindling attendance, decided, screw it, we're going to move to Toronto. And Toronto was ready for baseball, even though the exhibition stadium wasn't really a baseball stadium, but they had a baseball stadium set up. Unfortunately, though, San Francisco Mayor George Moscone, he of the guy who got assassinated 2 years later, alongside Harvey Milk, blocked it and got a local owner to buy it. So that ruined the Blue Jays. But the good news was that there was wheels in motion. The American League wanted to expand, mostly because Seattle was whining because of them losing their franchise, the Pilots, to Milwaukee in 1970, just when spring training was about to roll. And the fact of the matter was that they had an antitrust lawsuit. And the American League says, we'll allow it. And they wanted another team. So they decided to go with Washington. Why? Because Washington's a good team, a good city, and they've had a couple franchises that failed. However, the wheels in motion for Toronto to get that second expansion spot ahead of Washington happened due to the efforts of one Ewing Kauffman, the owner of the Kansas City Royals. Reason being? Simple. Because his wife Muriel was a Torontonian, and she sold her husband on the merits of baseball in Toronto. After all, Toronto had a very good AAA team, the Maple Leafs, not to be associated with the hockey team, but anyway, in the 1920s and 30s. Heck, Toronto was where Babe Ruth hit his first professional home run as a member of the Red Sox AAA affiliates. So yeah, Toronto had some deep history with baseball and all that. So Toronto got the second expansion spot for 1977, started on an opening day, beating the White Sox 9-5 and being first place in the AL East. It didn't last long. Even though the Blue Jays only won 59 games that year, the Blue Jays actually did beat the Yankees, the 1977 Yankees, the eventual world champion Yankees, by a score of 19-3 in the Bronx. The Blue Jays would be suffering through the expansion woes as most teams were, but in 1983 they made a run. By July 1983, when ABC came for Monday Night Baseball, the Blue Jays were in first place and it looked good, but a disastrous road trip in Detroit and Baltimore in August ruined it. 1984, the Blue Jays were second in the division. The only problem was the team that beat them for the division was the 1984 Detroit Tigers, and they were on a roll. Of course, we're skipping 1985 because we're just going through the franchise stuff. The Blue Jays would putt around. And in 87, they had a golden chance to win the AL East. They were up by 3.5 with 7 games left. All they needed to do was win a few games. But they didn't win any that week. And worst of all, the Tigers swept the Blue Jays on the final weekend of the season in Detroit, which ruined the Blue Jays' season because all the Blue Jays had to do was win 2 out of 3 to clinch the division, or at worst, 1 out of 3 and set up a one-game playoff. I believe it would have been in Toronto on the Monday. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So then the Blue Jays won the division in 1989, coming from a terrible 12-24 start to beat the Orioles and win the division on the second last day of the season. Although Ricky Henderson would make mincemeat of the Blue Jays in the ALCS. In 1991, the Blue Jays won the division on the last week against the California Angels. But unfortunately, the Twins beat the Jays in 5 games in the ALCS, and Joe Carter was hurt. In 92 and 93, Toronto made Canada big on the baseball map as we won both World Series, back-to-back World Series, taking care of a very tough Atlanta team in 92 and a ragtag Phillies team in 1993. Joe Carter's 3-run home run, still one of the greatest walk-off home runs in history. Sorry, Bill Mazeroski. 1994, the Blue Jays struggled, but the Expos were trying to bring Canada a third straight World Series. Didn't happen because of that stupid strike, and it ruined Montreal forever. Fuck you, Bud Selig. The Blue Jays were put around when they got Roger Clemens, surprisingly, in free agency in 1997. It was supposed to help the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays would languish, even though Clemens won back-to-back Cy Youngs as a member of the Blue Jays, and then he was traded to the Yankees. The Blue Jays in the 2000s would be decent and all that. They just couldn't get over the hump. By 2015, things were lost. Toronto was 50-51 at one point. However, they made an 11-game winning streak, and they basically blew the water out of things and won the AL East surprisingly. It got us a date with Texas in the LDS, down 2-0. It looked like it was mincemeat. We were done for, but we won 3 straight games, including the Batista bat flip game. 2016, a wildcard home game against Baltimore happened. Edwin Encarnacion 3-run tater-tot to win the game and send us to the LDS against our old rivals, Texas. But we swept Texas in 3 straight and that crazy Game 3 finish. And I'll never forget watching the footage and seeing that fan sign. I would rather be punched in May than knocked out in October because of the whole Batista Odor punch thing. But yeah, that's what the sign said. The Blue Jays have been languishing around. They haven't won a playoff game since 2016, which sucks. They got swept by the Twins. They have been terrible. I believe they and the Orioles are tied for the longest win drought in a postseason with like 11 games. But yeah, I'm not giving up on the Blue Jays. I never give up on the Blue Jays. And as of this taping, they have signed Anthony Santander. I don't know if the Blue Jays are going to make any more moves. Allegedly, Scherzer might come to town, but we'll see. And of course, this is when this is being taped. Scherzer's not a Blue Jay or Fernlander, but Scherzer. But anyway, yeah, let's talk about the 1985 Blue Jays, the Jays of my birth. So let's talk about the 1985 Toronto Blue Jays, the 9th season of Major League Baseball, winning 99 games. It's still a franchise record, and the first time the Blue Jays won a division. So in November, Cliff Johnson, or Heathcliff is known, was granted free agency. He left, and that was the time when he hit his 19th pinch hit home run, breaking an MLB record. The Jays signed Tom Filer from the Cubs, and in the Rule 5 draft, they took Manny Lee, Lou Forden, and Mike Morgan. Manny Lee would stay with Toronto. Lou Forden kind of went to AAA, and Mike Morgan was nothing. They made the first of a few major deals in December 1984 when they picked up Bill Caldwell from Oakland for Dave Collins, Alfredo Griffin, and cash. A lot of people were shocked. Well, the Jays needed something for their bullpen, and Caldwell was a good bullpen move. But Dave Collins was a speedster with 60 stolen bases for the Blue Jays. And Alfredo Griffin was the Blue Jays shortstop since 1978 when he won the AL Rookie of the Year. However, let's not forget that Tony Fernandez was in the wings, so the Blue Jays needed to make a move. And then they picked up Jeff Burles from Oakland to help their designated hitter role. And then what happened was when Cliff Johnson signed with Texas on December 5th, 1984, the Blue Jays were allowed to have a free agent compensation pick. And they chose Tom Hankey from the Rangers organization, put him in AAA, and then Hankey was waiting in the wings. The Jays would strengthen their bullpen by getting Gary Lavelle from San Francisco for Jim Gott, Jack McKnight, and Augie Schmidt. Augie Schmidt's a famous name because he won the Golden Spikes Award in 1982, was it? Which is the college baseball equivalent to the Heisman for college football. And yeah, he wasn't much of a player. Anyway, in April, they released Brian Clark and Roy Lee Jackson and acquired Len Matusek from Philadelphia for prospects. So anyway, the Blue Jays were huge. In April they weren't that bad. In May they just picked up, and by the early May they were in first place, which actually was the last time the Jays would not be in first place. They were first place to the end, and yeah, let's not forget about Buck Martinez and that double play. Phil Bradley was on second base in that game when Gordon Thomas singled. Bradley was tagged out at home as Barfield, with the laser cannon arm, got it to Buck Martinez. Unfortunately, there was a collision between Bradley and Martinez would break his ankle. Martinez was on the ground in agony and threw the ball to third base to try to get Gorman Thomas, but the throw went into left field. But George Bell picked it up and threw it back to Martinez, and Gorman was caught for the out. That was the end of Buck Martinez's season with the Jays. He would play one more year for the Jays before going to commentating. So anyway, the Jays and Yankees were in a tight AL East. The Jays looked good, but the Yankees were picking up steam in '85. There was a famous four-game series in in New York, from September 12th to 15th. And the Blue Jays lost the first game, but then picked up steam and won the last three. But it will always be remembered for the Yankee fans booing the Canadian national anthem in game one. And game two, before the anthem, Bob Shepard, the famous Yankees PA announcer, reminded fans at a time that, Canada sacrificed themselves to get the hostages out of Iran and all that. But then the third game on a Saturday night, Mary O'Dowd was singing the national anthem because it was Irish American night. But unfortunately, not only did she butcher the Canadian national anthem, she didn't sing anything close to the Canadian national anthem and needed the words. But nevertheless, Blue Jays got 3 out of 4 in New York, and then it was down to the final weekend at home against the Yankees. The Jays had a chance to clinch on the Friday, but Tom Hankey gave up a late home run to Butch Weingart, of all people. But the Blue Jays on the Saturday afternoon, in which CTV, which is one of the big Canadian networks, got permission from TSN to broadcast the game. So TSN would have done the game for cable, but because of how big the implications were, CTV with the Canadian thing going coast to coast, and there was no Don Chevrier or Tony Kubek, because those two had to do stuff across the border. So it was Fergie Oliver, and I can't remember the color commentator's name, but I think it was Jimmy Williams. I can't remember, but yeah, Fergie Oliver was the play-by-play guy. But the Jays won 5-1 and finally got a division title and got the Blue Jays to the playoffs. The Blue Jays struggled against Boston and Kansas City, the two teams that they only got. They were below 500. Well, they released Willie Aikens, and then 10 days later assigned Willie Aikens, which was funny. They traded Mitch Webster to Montreal. They acquired Al Oliver from Los Angeles for Len Matusek. So they traded Matusek for Oliver. They needed some hitting. And then they picked up Cliff Johnson in late August 1985 for the pennant run. And then signed Julio Junior Felix and Francisco Cabrera to contracts as amateur free agents. Junior Felix would do much better in '89, being a fresh-faced rookie and hitting that inside the park home run at Fenway Park. And Francisco Cabrera would be better known 7 years later for helping Atlanta win the pennant. Anyway, the 1985 Blue Jays were this: Jim Acker, Doyle Alexander, Darrell Doyle as they call him, Bill Caldwell, John Cerruti, the late John Cerruti, Jim Clancy, Stan Clark, Steve Davis, Tom Filer, Tom Hankey, Jimmy Key, Dennis Lamp, Gary LaFell, Louis Leal, Ron Musselman, and Dave Steve. The catchers were that appeared in games: Gary Allison, Jeff Herron, Buck Martinez, Steve Nicosa, and Ernie Witt. The infields were Tony Fernandez, Cecil Fielder, a young Cecil Fielder, Damaso Garcia, Kelly Gruber, a young Kelly Gruber, Greg Orch, Rick Leach, former football star from University of Michigan, Manny Lee, Brent Smolnix, and Willie Upshaw. Outfielders were Jesse Barfield, George Bell, Lloyd Mosby, which they called the best outfield in baseball because of all those assists, like runners. Ron Shepard, Lou Ford, and Mitch Webster complemented them, Willie Aikens was around for a little bit. Jeff Burrows, Cliff Johnson, Len Matusek, and Al Oliver came in. It's kind of weird how you have two players wearing zeros, one with a single zero and one with a double zero. Yeah, in April they were 6 games above 500. May they were pretty well. June they went through a swoon like they usually do. July 8 games above 500. August 8 games above 7 games above 500. October was disastrous. There were 6 games in October. They only won one, but it didn't matter. So anyway, I'll show you the ALCS. So they played a lot of night games. Nevertheless, game one they beat the tar out of the Royals 6-1. Game two was a late game heroics by Al Oliver, helping them go up 2-0. They lost game three thanks to George Brett. And a lot of opposition fans say that Toronto was too polite to George Brett. They should have intentionally walked him because of how dangerous he was. In game four, they won 3-1, and it looked like the Blue Jays were going to get themselves to the World Series. But they lost 3 straight games by a combined score of 13-5. So the Blue Jays collapsed, a 3-1 LCS collapse. You see the starting lineup: Witt, Upshaw, Garcia, Molnix, Fernandez, Bell, Mosby, Barfield, Jeff Burrows played most games at DH. Everyone else, the starters, Steve 14 and 13, a 2.48 ERA, which led the American League, but he didn't get the run support. Doyle Alexander won 17 games for them. Jimmy Key won 14 for them. Jim Clancy, Louis Little, Tom Filer was 7-0. But that paled to Dennis Lamp, who had an 11-0 season, the most wins without a loss in baseball history in one season. So anyway, the ALCS happened and all that. Now, one of the biggest shocks was that Tony Kubek, who's doing commentary for NBC and who did commentary for the Blue Jays broadcast, actually said that Kansas City might win because of the fact that they had the left-handed starters, which Toronto struggled against. Of course, Toronto won this game. Toronto did that. Steve B. Liebrand, Hanky B. Quisenberry with runs in the 10th, even though Willie Wilson and Pat Sheridan went deep. Game three saw George Brett hit a pair of tater tots off Toronto pitching. Toronto won game four 3-1 as Hanky beat Liebrand. And then they choked and all that. So, yeah, that was just amazing. Yeah, the Toronto Blue Jays, the 1985 Blue Jays were the first team to choke 3-1 in the LCS because the LCS format was always best of 5. But in 1985, they conveniently put it to best of 7. Maybe because the Cubs blew a 2-0 series lead and everyone loved the Cubs. So they made it best of 7, meaning you had to win 4 games to go to the World Series, not 3. Imagine, under the old rules, the Toronto Blue Jays would have went to the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals, and that's what we're going to be simulating. Not only that, but it actually would have had major implications on the National League side. You're thinking that's incorrect, but it is correct because everyone remembers Ozzie Smith's home run in Game 5 to send the Cardinals up 3-2 to LA, and then, of course, Jack Clark's home run in Game 6. Ozzie Smith's home run would have been way more legendary because it would have been a pennant winner, which there's rarely any of. The only 2 examples I can think of off the top of my head are Chris Chambliss and Travis Ishikawa. I think there's more. Oh, yeah. Miggy Cabrera had a pennant-winning home run. And no, Miggy Ordonez, sorry, in Game 4 for the Tigers, sending them to the World Series against the Cardinals because I remember Tom Brenneman's call and all that. But the fact of the matter is the 1985 Blue Jays choked the 3-1 series lead, and now we'll see if they can beat the Cardinals in the World Series fair and square. All right, so the 1985 Cardinals await in Toronto. Now the question is, why is the Cardinals the away team? It's not bias. It's because of the rule at the time that baseball would switch between the AL and NL to have home field advantage. So the Blue Jays and the American League had home field advantage for games 1, 2, 6, and 7. Everyone remembers the 1985 World Series in real life that the Royals won game 6 and 7 on home turf. And in a very underrated moment, Glenn Campbell's national anthem performance was just legendary. I will die on that hill. But the fact of the matter was that, yeah, Kansas City, well, Dankinger and all that. So we take away Dankinger and all that in a sense. So the Cardinals and Blue Jays would face each other. The Cardinals, of course, using the DH role, which I made Cesar Cedeno. Now I know a lot of people will be probably thinking Tino Landrum's leadoff guy. Now originally I was going to leave everything as is and then have Cesar Cedeno as DH. But the problem was because Vince Coleman in real life injured himself in the LCS, he didn't play in the World Series. So I made the conscious decision to put Tito Landrum in at center field instead of Vince Coleman. Because I'm trying to go as real life as possible. And I do have the rotation for the Cardinals. It was a 3-man rotation for the Cardinals. So the Blue Jays will use a 3-man rotation. Assuming that Steve won game 7, he definitely would be too tired to pitch game 1 of the World Series. So I'm going to go with Doyle Alexander for game 1. And game 1 sees the Cardinals crush the Blue Jays 10-1. We did score the first run as Willie Upshaw hit a double play. Tito Landrum hit a home run to center field, so we needed Vince Coleman. Daryl Porter hit an RBI double to score McGee in the 4th. Cesar Cedeno singled to score Porter. Landrum singled to score Pendleton, and Tommy Hurst scored Cedeno with a hit. Tom Filer had to come in to pitch. And then in the 5th, Daryl Porter hits a sac fly to score Willie McGee. And then in the 7th, after a triple by McGee, Fence Lake flies out to score McGee. And then Andy Fence Lake hits a 2 RBI single to score Landrum and Herb, making Tom Hankey come in the game. George Bell would misplay a ball, which scored Ozzie Smith, so this was 10-1. Doyle went 3 2/3, did not do well. Tom Filer went 4 innings, giving up 4 runs, which was weird how he stayed so long, and Tom Hankey in the 3rd. The Cardinals didn't need anyone else, as John Tudor provided his fantastic pitching and won that game. So game 2 sees Andujar, like in real life, pitch, and Dave Stieb pitched this game 2 because he's healthy enough. Did that make a difference? No, it didn't. It was 6-5. Toronto scored first again as Witt RBI single in the 2nd to score Mulnix, and Fernandez hit one to score Upshaw. However, the Cardinals scored 2 in the 3rd as Landrum singles to score Pendleton, and Tommy Hurst hits an fielder's choice to score Cedeno. George Bell would hit an RBI single to score Barfield to make it 3-2. And then in the 4th, Ozzie Smith hit a single to score Fence Lake, and Pendleton scored Smith. So it was an offensive battle. So at least top of the 7th, Fence Lake single to score Clark, and then after Fence Lake was nailed on a caught stealing, Daryl Porter hit a home run down the right field line to make it 6-3. The Jays would come back in the 7th as Jesse Barfield hit a double to score Fernandez and Mosby, making Bill Campbell come in to pitch. 6-5 for the last time. Jeff Latty came in to pitch. I guess they didn't have the power of Tyler Worrell yet. Fernandez, Garcia, and Mosby all grounded up. Because this is, I guess, they give precedence to the guys who started the 1985 season. Dave C went 7 innings and didn't do so well. Colorado and Lavelle did decent in relief for him. Andujar went 6 2/3, and Campbell inning 3rd, and Lottie the save. After Andujar left, no hits for the Jays. So the Cardinals would have a 2-0 series lead. Game 3 would see Danny Cox come on the mound, and the Blue Jays, it would be Jimmy Key, because they needed a left-handed pitcher, if you will. We have to add the lineup again. Vince Coleman is not in. It's Landrum in center field. Yeah, it's Landrum for Game 3. Game 3 sees the Cardinals win 3-2, a close one. No score till the 5th as the Blue Jays scored again to start the game. Garcia hit a single to score Fernandez. Then in the 6th, it all went for shit. Clark walked, McGee singled. Fence Lake hit a big double to score both Clark and McGee. Porter hit a single the 3rd. Ozzie Smith hits the fielder's choice. They dump Key off for Caudle, and he gets those outs. It was 3-1. Mulnix in the 8th came in to hit a single to score Barfield, and Bill Campbell came in for the 3rd out. Lottie came in for the save. Witt flew out. Fernandez singled. Garcia hit in fielder's choice. Garth Orr tried to come in to pinch hit. Tomaso stole 2nd, but Gore struck out. So Cox goes 7 2/3 innings, doing well. Campbell 1 out, and then Lottie the save. The Blue Jays Key 5 1/3. Cotto and Lavelle did well in relief. So it's 3-0. Now I know the Cardinal fans will say, "Wait a minute, John Tudor, isn't it supposed to be Bob Forsch?" Well, Tudor pitched game 4, and then Bob Forsch pitched game 5. But I'm going with a 3-man rotation because Tudor would have went next, so it is Tudor 1-2-3 1-2-3. So Tudor pitched games 1, 4, and 7. So that's a 3-man rotation in my book. And we see the Blue Jays get their asses whipped 6-1. They out hit the Cardinals. But yeah, the Cardinals would have won the World Series. Willie McGee hit a RBI single, and for the first time, the Blue Jays actually gave up their first run. It's weird how the Jays scored the first run of the game in games 1, 2, and 3, and they couldn't win. They did get a run as Fernandez hit a RBI single to score Molnix. And then in the bottom of the fourth, Darrell Porter came in. While Clark struck out, McGee singled and stole second. Fence like picks ball 4. They pull off a double steal, and then Darrell Porter, of all freaking people, hit one down the right field line to make it 4-1. Joe Alexander makes a throwing error to make it 5-1. Bottom of the 8th, Dennis Lamp came in to pitch, and Cesar Cedeno came in to pinch hit for Tudor and grounded through a single to score Ozzie Smith. Barfield makes a bad error. Her grounds out. So 6-1. Bill Campbell came in to pitch. Garcia singled. Garth Orch comes in to pinch hit. He hits an fielder's choice. Mosby pops up. Barfield singles, but Bell lines out the third. Game over. And the Blue Jays, despite hitting the Cardinals, lose the game. John Tudor goes 8 innings practically for the win. Bill Campbell for the 9th. And the Blue Jays, Doyle went 5. Then Caldwell, Lavelle, and Dennis Lamp came in for the pitching, but that was it. So the Blue Jays would have been swept out of town by the Cardinals. Well, in essence, the Blue Jays would have won the World Series, would have been out of the World Series. The Cardinals were just that good with their pitching and hitting, and the Blue Jays just couldn't do their pitching. So yeah, 9 times out of 10, the Cardinals probably would have teamed the Blue Jays. Too bad I couldn't do the 1 out of 10. But that's the rule. I have to live with it. So the Blue Jays would have been crushed. Blue Jays would have lost the World Series in my birth year, but still, I mean, hey, Toronto made the World Series in my birth year, if only. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do